Welcome to the Breakpoint Show, the podcast dedicated to analyzing the Netflix tennis docu-series Breakpoint episode by episode. I am Gill Gross with Alex Gruskin. As always, this is Season 2, Episode 4, Now or Never. Jessica Pegula, Maria Sakkari are the focal points this time around. And I think they were kind of going for, here are two women in a very similar situation. And it was kind of a, happy ending for both of them as they overcome their mental hurdles, their kind of blocks that they each had. I guess for Pegula, it's kind of major quarterfinals, but I mean, she didn't break that one, but she won a title. Sakkari, 2018 Rabat, that was the last title. And that was a really bad one when it comes to like tennis mental hurdles that need to be scaled. They both end up doing it, and Netflix has a front row seat for both of it. So Gruskin, I'll leave you with that as I ask you, what did you think of this one?
Well, I think more than anything, it continues to be indicative of the changes in the way they're trying to tell the story of what's happening in the pro tennis world here in Season 2. And to be completely frank, I have preferred it. I think Season 2 has been a significant improvement to what we saw in Season 1, even down to the detail of, it was only a 2-minute interlude. But in this episode, they said, hey, here's what's going on right now in the WTA Tour. You've got this young changing of the guard, players like Swiatek, even Sabalenka, who's still 25 and under, Rybakina, etc. They're all on the rise. And if you're a player like Sakkari, a player like Pegula in your mid to late 20s, you feel like now is your window. There is some urgency. If you want to be one of the best in the game and win the biggest of titles, now is the chance to do so before these young stars consolidate their position. And Pegula and Sakkari are great mechanisms, vessels, characters, whatever adjective you want to use to try and tell that story. So I really enjoyed their approach to this episode more broadly. It helps that Sakkari and Pegula are both extraordinarily likable. I thought this was a great episode.
I liked what they tried to do here. I liked the storylines. And remember at the end of Season 1, we talked about basically who do we want to see in Season 2? And both of us said we need to see Jessica Pegula. She is fascinating, both on and off the court. Just like an incredibly unique background, very down-to-earth person with a good sense of humor. And I kind of want to go behind the scenes. I want to know more about it. She has that fantastic, I'll call it inspirational, really. This inspirational story about what was going on behind the scenes with her mother. The Bills angle, maybe it's because I'm a football fan, but I find that fascinating. Like Pegula at Bills practice, give me that. I love that. And I definitely am glad that they chose to cover her. I mean, Sakkari, we've talked about how everything is kind of mental when it comes to the Breakpoint show. And when you have a player where it is indeed so mental to the point where I think some of the most real and raw scenes that we've had in the entire series, even going back to Season 1, are Sakkari breaking down in the presence of Tom Hill. Like Tom Hill trying to, metaphorically speaking, talk Sakkari off the ledge when it comes to her just having no confidence in herself and going into a dark place when it comes to her tennis, right? So we got those two things. But I think also at the end of the episode, when it's all said and done, I thought that similar to episode 3 of this season, I am kind of wanting more memorable moments, super standout moments. Find myself feeling like I want to know more about the process that Sakkari went through in terms of overcoming her mental hurdle. I want to know more about Jessica Pegula. So I like where they were going with it, but I did feel like maybe I didn't get enough.
So this is fascinating. I would love for people who are watching this on YouTube, listening to the podcast, to share their thoughts as well, because it's not that I disagree with you, but it gets back to how they tried to tell the story in season 2 versus how they told those stories in season 1. And I think we're going to have time later in this episode to get to the Jessica Pegula background discussion, because talk about a player who, yes, everyone knows surface level. She is the daughter of a billionaire, someone who owns an NFL team. Obviously, that comes with an extraordinarily amount of wealth, opportunity, etc. But she's never opened up about that background. We didn't know what her life looked like as a child, how that wealth has impacted how she goes about her day-to-day business. And we got insight into this episode
A
into that
little.
topic in a way we didn't. And so I'm glad you said that, because that brings me back on point here, and we can get more into that background later. The episodes in season 2, much more than season 1, they just kind of get on with the episode. Like, it gets on with things. And what I mean by that in the positive sense is there were times in season 1 where I was just like, all right, enough of this. I don't really want to watch this story anymore. I'm sorry, I don't care about this storyline, or I don't understand how this relates more broadly to what you're trying to tell me. That is not the case in any of the episodes in season 2. You're right. It is a little bit more superficial in terms of the level of detail it describes, but I don't think that's a bad thing, because this episode gets back to the crux of the issue, which is, hey, like, these are top tennis players in the world on the chase. And ultimately, that's what this show, I feel like, is trying to be about here in season 2, is the Americans, Runa Alcaraz, Sabalenka, now Zverev, now these two as well. Like, that is what the story they're trying to tell us. This is what the chase looks like. And they don't waste time telling you things that might otherwise distract from that narrative.
Sure. I want it to feel rewarding when Sakkari wins Guadalajara. I want it to feel rewarding when Pegula wins Canada. And, like, in a way, yes, it was rewarding at the time, even last year when I saw it. So I understand how the title drought plagues Maria and her psyche for so long. And I understand that Pegula, despite being Mrs. Quarterfinals in her own words, wanting to break free from that and get big wins like the one she got over Iga. I get that that's meaningful. I just want, I just think the point of having cameras behind the scenes is to get a little bit more. And, like, okay, I'll give you an example. I didn't know that the Pegulas didn't fall into completely crazy generational money until Jess was 17 or 18 years old. I didn't really realize that happened so late in her childhood. That's a good nugget. I learned something there. That is kind of the sort of thing that I'm kind of wanting. But, like, in terms of questions I have, so she's a late bloomer. David Witt comes in, and that's a turning point. What is it about David Witt that got her to kind of turn around her career? Like, what did she do? Because she was a late bloomer. Why did it click for her? I think I know the answer just from my background knowledge of tennis. Like, I think she got in better shape. I think she started becoming less of an aggressive player and more of a consistent player. And I think that helped her. But, like, can we get into that stuff? I want to know these things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, Breakpoint just wants you to assume the improvement was always mental. So that's all they got for you. But no, it's really well said by you. Again, a question I would have off of your point there, I wonder if part of this is the byproduct of, look, they got 6 episodes to tell these stories. And I'll tell you what, in the way they've told them, the storytelling fashion or rubric they have used here in season 2, I could use 6 more episodes on 2023. I could get follow-ups on all the 6 topics you hit in these first 6 episodes. Maybe not, obviously, a Zverev follow-up. I think I'm good with just one story there, but certainly, okay. And I know episode 6 is going to do that with the Americans, but it has been really, really interesting to see, like, again, I think season 1, they left us, or maybe gave us a little bit too much. I think season 2, yeah, they leave you wanting a little more, but I wonder if that's a strategy for them to look to Netflix and say, hey, like, we can give you more if you give us 6 more episodes per season.
I think it's not about the too much or too little. I think it's just about the quality and just, like, finding those moments. Here's one moment as we get into the episode. It's a good transition. Here's one moment, like, I really liked. Sakkari and Annette Kontaveit on the practice courts at Wimbledon.
That was fascinating.
How good was that? I mean,
Yeah.
Annette, I wasn't really aware of what Annette's plans were after tennis or what the vibe was for, like, a young player Maria's age who just kind of had this injury and was like, yeah, I have to stop. And Kontaveit, as far as retirements go, pretty shocking, just given her age and where she was at. I mean, yeah, she was struggling for results for a bit, but like we didn't think Kontaveit was retiring. That moment where I felt like a fly on the wall for what was a real conversation of, holy crap, Annette is leaving the tour. Like, this is my friend. We've played together forever. And just them having that honest conversation, that was something that I really loved in this episode.
It's like looking into a mirror if you're Maria Sakkari, a mirror of this could be me if things don't shift gears, if I can't find another level. And you see the fear that she's describing manifested in the fact that, again, injuries means Kontaveit has to retire, and Kontaveit, for what it's worth, is a little younger than Sakkari, like even younger and at the top of her powers, and she's forced to retire due to injury. And to Maria Sakkari, in her mindset, I am this superior athlete. I've been gifted, obviously, with muscles and the ability to move in ways others can't. And so, I know my window is fleeting. Like, I want to make the most of it. And she feels that pressure, and that pressure perhaps is personified in the contrast with the Kontaveit, who is winding things down here at the end of the career. You're right. Like, that is a very powerful moment. That is the perfect contrast to offer you a window into what Sakkari fears. The flip side would be like, I think it was the perfect, and this is not to badger on this point, I think they showed us the perfect amount of that conversation. Like, you got the depth, the insight you were looking for, and it was the perfect way to set kind of what Sakkari was chasing throughout the season and why she may have been going through some struggles.
Well, it was kind of wild how often the retirement thing came up with Maria, right?
Sure.
That was weird. I didn't expect that. And that kind of upped the stakes a little bit. Because Sakkari was talking about retirement the whole episode, and she's 28. And then, I mean, obviously there's growth there. I think there's that scene in the car where she's just like, no, I'm in a good place now. I think I'm going to win eventually. And then she wins Guadalajara. So it ends in a happy place. But I mean, did you have any idea that Maria was like going around all of 2023, in the words of Tom Hill, like every 2 weeks talking about just quitting tennis?
What was so fascinating about the Sakkari story is clear the social media pressure gets to her, that she is reading the comments, that the semifinal streak that people talk about anecdotally on tennis Twitter, that was something she thought about actively, something she was keenly aware of, that even beyond the title drought, like, hey, I can't win semifinals this year. What is going on with me? And again, it accentuates the point Breakpoint's trying to make, how much of this game is mental, and a lot of it is mental. They're not wrong in that sense, but to see the way it viscerally affected Sakkari, the way, by the way, if you played enough tennis, you get that. Like, there are times after a bad loss, I think we've all had that moment. I'll never forget, and this is, again, apologies for equating my tennis career to theirs, but senior year of college, we had match points, finals of the Badger Classic, the only event we didn't win during my time in club. 2 match points on my serve. I doubled both of them. And I just remember in the car being distraught and being like, you're a senior. You wasted one of 20 weekends you have left in Ann Arbor coming to a tennis event in Madison, Wisconsin to double twice on match point. Like, what sort of life choices are you making, Alex? You got to move on beyond this sport. Now, ultimately, I work in the sport, so perhaps you get why I am, but like, imagine that, but it's your job. Like, the most extreme version of that. That's Maria Sakkari every time after a loss. It's just like, well, why am I doing this if this is where I am? Like, I'm really going to continue to lift all these weights, run all these sprints, feel like shit a bunch of the time, just so that, like, I can lose in the semifinals. Why am I doing that? I'm past that point of my life. And obviously, again, that speaks to tennis being a single person sport. It speaks to, you don't have teammates you can turn to sub you out when you're in a stretch like that. That's what she's going. That's what they continue to try to stress, and you get it maybe in the most visceral way possible in this Sakkari portrayal.
It also speaks to why she isn't winning the matches, because I mean, it's too much pressure. Like, when you're freaking out to the point where you're wanting to retire 5 times a year. I mean, it's just not a healthy way to go about life on tour. I mean, Roger Federer, I think, is like kind of the golden example of how to actually enjoy life on tour. And it's like, that means something, right? Like, the fact Alcaraz, you can see, he's another example, like just likes this. He just has a good time. That's a big deal. So
And I also
hopefully,
think late stage Djokovic, like he clearly is enjoying the life down the
yeah.
home stretch, and that has helped him. And by the way, even bringing up that double fault loss, like I'm get my goosebumps. Like I'm angry. Like I'm feeling it angry. And thankfully, like Sakkari, we had a happy ending come our final tournament in April. I think the listeners want to know, do you have a loss like that that would have removed you to like, why am I? Was it the first time I beat you? The second time? Which time?
It doesn't. You've never beaten me. Uh, no, I mean, no. The most distraught I've been about tennis is when I've lost to people who I dislike personally or
Sure.
who I think don't work hard. And that used to get to me. When I used to lose to people who I work harder than, used to piss me off a lot. I just felt like why do they have more talent than me? I'm
So
working harder.
that's Maria Sakkari in a nutshell. It's like, I don't get it. I am more athletic than you. I have better biceps. I have better quads. My core is stronger. Like I do the sprints. I put in the work. How am I still losing in these fucking semifinals? Like if anything, that resonates with her extraordinarily. Like
Yeah.
if she heard you say that, she'd be like, Gil, you are speaking my language. Like, welcome to the club, brother.
Right.
By the way, we're going to tangent off the tangent here. I promise. Then we can get back on script and still keep this episode in the right amount of time. I don't think we've talked about this yet, but Monday Match Analysis listeners watch your mailbags, and they should. And you got a question. I think it was your no pro tennis question mailbag where someone asked you about me versus you. And I don't think we've talked about your answer yet. And I loved it. I loved every detail of it. And I just want you to know the most accurate thing you have ever said, at least about our relationship in your life, is when you said, look, when we walk on the court, we both expect to win. Gruskin more than me. And I was like, he gets it. He's like, that's just the guy knows me. And so that's just proof we're friends.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like yeah. I mean, there's no doubt about it in terms of who would be more upset when we finally do play a match. Like
I work harder. I
you'll be
do
more
the
upset.
sprints. I put in the work. And like, that's why, in a nutshell, this is what I'm saying is why this was a good episode to bring it all home. Is because if you are a tennis player in this individual sport, like that is Maria Sa. I'm so happy you said that because you crystallized it perfectly. It's like, I am working harder than you. I am on this exercise bike if it's me, or in her case, lifting weights, doing all the things. Like, how the fuck am I losing to Gill Gross or whatever it may be, in her case, someone else? And so I totally get it.
Because my forehand is better than yours. We need to talk about, you hit on it slightly, but we need to talk about the social media aspect of this because they brought that in a very relevant way. I think for, Jess to have the quarterfinal hump, for Maria to have the title thing, yeah, like that is a force online when it comes to random internet commenters and degenerate gamblers and all of those things. It really comes into focus with those two. And Pegula, her background is brought up all the time whenever somebody is angry enough to want to send her abuse. So they brought that into the show. They covered it as a topic. And I'm seeing it more and more brought into the mainstream as a topic, just in general. I think players are talking about it a lot for some reason recently. It's a fascinating issue. And I like that they brought it into the show because I think it is a pretty big part of tennis players' lives. And I think that Osaka had the quote, the golden rule of tennis. She didn't say like, hey, I have a tip for you about life. She said, no, the golden rule of tennis.
It's not serve wide on a deuce point. Yeah, no.
It's like, it's not the secret is footwork.
No spin, no win,
racket
no win.
head speed. No.
Drop the tip, give it a flip.
It's don't look at Twitter or Instagram. That's the golden rule of tennis.
Well known. It's etched in Newport. I don't know if you knew that. That's what you see over the hall when you walk in. Like, yeah, you're so right. It is fascinating. Certainly, I had moments where I was like, oh, I might have sent a tweet about Sakkari's semifinal record because it was striking in the moment. And the biggest thing is they all read it. Like, how could you not? We read the comments for these episodes. Imagine that amplified by a million. Like, that's who the best of these best players, that's what their followings are. And obviously, they deal with people who are gambling money on them, who lose that money and send the most cruel, unnecessary, unjustifiable, vile sorts of comments their direction. It certainly makes you conscious of, oh, I wonder how I would react if I see that. Like, there are people who I know in the comments have said to you, like, what, you know what? I can tell you one that sticks in my mind. Is this a therapy session? Are we just going through things, the double faults? And then someone goes, in response to, oh, I don't get why Gill has Gruskin on this show, like whatever it be. Someone goes, oh yeah, he must just be his friend. Like in the most dismissive way of like, oh, he's doing him a favor. And I wanted to just be like, man, that would hurt. I mean, I'm fine. Don't worry. My ego is still healthy. But the point is like that amplified. It is real. And you feel it in visceral ways. And certainly again, like you mentioned it in Jessica Pegula's case. Yeah, she's rich now, came late. Like she has accomplished this leap late in her 20s on her own. Same with Maria Sakkari. Just look at the athlete that she is. That isn't accomplished without hard work. And you hear it undermined by these idiots, and you're just like, come on now. Not as saying your comments are idiots, because they're right. Like, I am your friend.
It's so trash, obviously, like the Pegula, like holding her parents' wealth against her. It's so trash. Yeah. At the same time, like my only issue with this whole topic is, and this kind of gets away from the Netflix show. I don't know how much this has to do with Breakpoint, but it's almost a dead end issue, right? Like, what are we going to do about it? Nothing. What is anybody going to do about it ever? That's my question.
It's really well said, because there are always going to be idiots out there, and you can follow the golden rule. Like that is the option for these players to tune out. And that's so difficult to do because they want to see what their friends are up to. They want to see what fellow players are up to. They want to experience life the same way all of us get the joys of social media. And you're right. It's a never ending circle of ideas you hope like, oh, regulate it out. It's just never going to work because again, me tweeting out, wow, this is Sakkari's 8th consecutive loss in the semifinal or whatever it may be. That's not a nice thing to tweet out. That's also just a statement of fact. And where is the line drawn there is probably the toughest thing we have to do in our job. And, you know, again, trying to filter out what content we want to create and share with the public. And it's like you feel, again, players go through that same thing.
Fair enough. I mean, I do think while some players resent certain media coverage, usually the media is not the ones that are causing the problem. It's the people sending slurs and saying, you know, awful shit. But even that, it's like, okay, you know, you can post that on Instagram and be like, see what I have to deal with. And then I see like, you know, journalists on Twitter being like, this is horrible, terrible. And it's like, it is, but are we wasting energy even talking about it? It's like, what's the activism here? Like Iga Swiatek last year, bless her heart, but asked journalists to try to get people to stop sending hate and abuse, right? She was like, she started the press conference being like, I just want to say this is really bad. And if any of you, the media, the people at the press conference can do anything to stop it, please do that. And Iga, I love the effort, but if there's one population that would give anything to get people to be nicer online, it's fucking journalists on Twitter who everybody hates. Yeah. So that's all I have on the social media thing. I like that it was a topic in this episode. It's very relevant, but sometimes I feel like it's a dead end.
No, it was relevant to this episode because it felt the negative reinforcement all of these players feel after a loss when you are down in the dumps and you are so frustrated about everything, and then you feel like these people are piling on when they have no context to the back to your background. And again, we got a lot about Maria Sakkari's background in season 1, so they talked more specifically about her 2023 throughout the course of this episode. And it was a very result. Like I love the way they told her story because I did think it was a fascinating story throughout the course of the year to see her ups and downs. And, again, she still lingered in the top 10 despite all that semifinal failure to finally get over the hump, win that title at the end of the year. Yeah, they didn't show you much of it, but they did show you that concluding moment. Like, again, I have enjoyed season 2 more than I've enjoyed season 1. I've really liked the way they've gone about telling the stories, and I think that social media and negative reinforcement driving upon her, even to the point where, again, she's asked warming up for something on a court, heads or up or down in terms of, flipping for side or whatever it may be. And she said, always up. And you're like, oh, I wonder why she'd make a joke like that. It's because she's working with a therapist. And again, this positive reinforcement, clearly something she's trying to work in. I enjoyed the Sakkari storyline. I do think, though, again, to your point you made earlier, who did we learn more about in this episode? It's Jessica Pegula for sure. And it was a fascinating tale to tell.
Yeah, even though, again, you may disagree, I feel like we probably could have learned more about both of them. You know
I
what I thought
want
was
to
another
learn more
fascinating
about
one?
Pegula.
Tom Hill calling the sports psychologist before talking to Maria.
Again, it's
this
the
is-
second time we've seen something like this. The Sabalenka in episode 1, I like censorship, man. It's everywhere.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a different situation because
Yeah, of
it was
course.
it was the physiotherapist making the comment, and then Sabalenka, I think I'll call him the unofficial psychologist, was like, bro, don't say that. And in this case, Tom was like, all right, like the match just happened. I need to talk to Maria. Let me consult with the psychologist to make sure about what I can and can't say.
No, it was again, they also had a really powerful post-Wimbledon talk when Sakkari was down in the dumps, and that Netflix was able to show us any of that
Yeah.
when, Tom Hill saying, we just need to find a way to get you feeling positive on the court again. Like, there were some the Conteve conversation. You said there were lacking memorable moments in this episode. I guess I just would disagree with that on face value. I mean, for God's sake, I now know what Jessica Pegula's husband looked like. I've been following her pretty closely for 5 years, had no idea. And so there's some memorable things for tennis fans and sports.
I wouldn't have minded a little more. I guess, look, you have to pick and choose and figure out what's interesting. Like maybe Taylor Gahagan? Maybe Gahagan.
I just have Taylor in my notes. I didn't even flirt with the last name.
Look, maybe
Mr. Pegula.
Maybe there's nothing interesting there with Taylor, but yeah, I thought, they're very recently married. David Witt, you got his vibe, easygoing, dry sense of humor, like seems like a really fun guy to have around. So okay, there were some moments. Do you know what I would have liked addressed? The fact that Tom Hill and Maria have been together so long, and Maria has kind of suffered on tour in some ways for so long, and that relationship just never broke. When sometimes it looks like it almost should break because they're having such a hard time, and in specifically Maria's having such a hard time. I want to know more about that. How is your bond so strong that even when Maria is at rock bottom, there's never a thought that she wants someone else in her corner?
I actually enjoyed the dynamic between coach and player in this episode more than any episode in the series thus far, because talk about coaches whose personalities reflect the players they're coaching. Like, to your point, Dave Witt, you're FaceTiming him. He's joking about naked and afraid. He's talking about getting his hole in one. He feels like he's always got a beer in hand. Like, laid back, perfect for Jessica Pegula, who you can tell David Witt can get intense. And when it's time to work, he's ready to work. That's clearly the Jessica Pegula story as well. But hey, there are times when you have to turn it off, and he will make that clear and keep that balance in life for Pegula, which I think she values so much. I think the intensity of Tom Hill is the perfect reflection of the intensity of Maria Sakkari. And she, as like Tom Hill, I could see working with a whole Garuna as well, coming off of episode 2, where it's two people who are like, hey, I need someone who is making me better always. Like, it keeps coming back to this theme. If I'm going to put in all this work on court, all this work in the gym, you better be doing that as well, because if you are not, I need to find someone else who will. And I think if nothing else, Tom Hill always gives Maria Sakkari that. Always someone who is ready for the next fight and continues to stay in the fight, even when the downs are down, and clearly believes in her. Like, you don't stick with someone for this long if there's not a belief and a trust there. And I just think they're on that same wavelength of type A, we go all out in everything we apply ourselves to. And I think you kind of see that, even if it can lead to some tense moments in conversations.
I think there's the belief. I also think he knows rather how to deal with her when her reasoning is being clouded by her emotions. And I mean, it's just not easy, right? That's what we've seen with the Tom Hill, Maria Sakkari relationship. It's like going back a couple episodes, we got a real kick out of this. Tom Hill was like, Julin's got a good forehand. And Maria was like, apoplectic that he would tell her that. So like, Tom, you need to be game. You need to embrace that aspect and you need to know how to handle it. And it seems like whatever Maria throws at him, he's ready to deal with it. So major props to him, and also major props to Maria for, also believing in him. It's just gone two ways there. And I think we can leave it at that. This has been season 2.
Well, if I may, just quickly, because I got you before you got to season 2 episode, so I'm going to leave it in. Just some final Pegula thoughts, because I do, like, we talked about it a little bit. This is someone who is now a billionaire. This is someone whose team owns a sporting franchise. And
2. You're omitting the Sabres over and over again.
I apologize.
And it's rude.
Well, then maybe take that out when you edit this out. But the point is, she opened up. Like, you kind of got to hear her talk about that wealth, talk about her dad driving her, talk about, again, the rock that her mom has been, open up about, hey, here were the health issues, by the way, that were sort of talked about superficially, but we never got depth and info like that, the way she was willing to share throughout the course of this episode. To see her talk about, again, okay, I'm Mrs. Consistent, and like the sarcasm she brings just seemingly at all points. Like, I really enjoyed being around Jessica Pegula more. I'm really happy we got no mention of the Cotton Eye Joe incident in Canada, because that was one of those overplayed moments that frustrated me in 2023. Netflix said, nope, too tacky. We're going to cut it. And I agree with that decision. Like, I just wish we could spend more time with Jessica Pegula as a character. Again, this was an episode that had me. So I guess, to your first point about I would have liked more, you're not wrong. They could have made this episode 15 minutes longer.
It's not about length. It's not about length.
No. But I'm saying we could have gotten more depth.
Right.
Well, I guess
like
that's
for example, Netflix didn't get anything about Kim, her mother, and the health incident that she didn't write in the Players Tribune in her piece. Now, it's an amazing story. There's also a privacy aspect there that needs to be respected. And, whatever Jessica wants to share is really the end of what we should know. But at the same time, as far as how rewarding was the experience of learning about this, there was nothing new, right? It's a great story. And for anybody who didn't read the Players Tribune story, I'm really glad they got it here. But I didn't learn anything.
Fair enough. The last thing I would point out, and this speaks to the Whit Pegula dynamic, the faith and trust he has in her, but this is just an interesting note for a coach when he says she gets through a slam quarterfinal, she's going to win that major. Kind of gets back to that theme of the mental breakthrough, but that's how confident Dave Whit is in her tennis. It also speaks to, like, hey, this is a mental hurdle. We are aware of it. I'm telling you, the moment she breaks through, it's just going to have everything else fall into piece. And I just think that was a keen observation shared by her coach, something you wouldn't probably get in a less candid environment.
Yeah, her and Rublev are in the same boat, huh?
Sure.
The major quarterfinals.
Absolutely. It's, again, one of the things to watch for in 2024.
Yeah, maybe they're on Andre for season 3. If they are, I haven't heard anything about season 3. I'm assuming that will be kept quiet for a while while they focus on season 2. We have one more episode left in this season. I'm really excited for it. There's a lot there. Brad Gilbert is a massive character. Coco Gauff is a massive character. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they can bring there. That is next. But for now, this has been Season 2, Episode 5, Now or Never, the Breakpoint Recap Show on the Gill Gross YouTube channel and the Crack Racquets Podcast Network.